What's good, party people? This is According to Woods, and I have the honor and privilege of talking to someone who is making his return to Josh Barnett's Bloodsport on October 11th in Indiana. He is the one and only, the Dirty Daddy, Chris Dickinson. Chris, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. I'm just chilling out, relaxing, watching some Joshi on TV or some old Joshi, which is what I pretty much do every day. And I went to the gym earlier. Probably gonna go to the gym a little bit later. I'm trying to really be careful about what I eat, but it's like really hard. I'm like, do I want to eat bad today? But I have a party I had to go to on Sunday, so I was kind of saving it up for that. I haven't really had any junk food since maybe like last Wednesday, so this is when I start to break, but I'm not breaking. I'm gonna stay strong. Stay strong.
I mean, it's moderation is key. I mean, I know The Rock, fucking kills it 6 days a week, and then he fucking eats like 2 pizzas, 8 stacks of pancakes. It's fucking ridiculous. So I think the wedding is pretty apropos to kind of let your ambitions do what it does.
Yeah, it's actually my nephew's communion party. He's having like a communion party. My stepsister's having like a big thing for it, so that'll be fun. I'll
Shout out
eat,
to your nephew.
Yeah, he's a big wrestling fan. Huge.
Oh, then I know he loves Uncle Chris, and he's fucking excited for Bloodsport on the 11th. 100%, right?
Yeah, he does. He's like definitely a huge fan. It's almost like a little overwhelming, but I love it. It is really, really funny, and it is cute too. He is 8 years old, so he watches everything I do. Like I was just I went over to my stepsister's house, and I was showing her, him and my niece. I have a niece; she's 5 years old, and we watched my match from the recent United Wrestling Network primetime live show. And they're so funny the way they react to everything I do. And on that show, I'm more of like a real like straightaway bad guy heel type of bruiser. They were like looking at me, and I was cussing and stuff. So it was like, oh God, what it's funny, but I have another niece too. My real sister, she's 10 years old. They watch everything I do. It's pretty funny, to be honest.
I think it's amazing that you mentioned the United Wrestling Network, because obviously Primetime Live is going to be on Fite, as is Josh Barnett's Bloodsport.
Yes.
I think the interesting take, what I took away from it, when you basically, squashed your opponent, and you were basically got on the stick and said, "Hey, there's not any real competition," and I was like, that's a pretty interesting take, because I don't know if you know, but Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, the co-commentator is this guy named he's an MMA fighter named Blake Bulletproof Troop,
Wow.
and he commentates with Todd Kenley. So I was just like, oh man, I already started booking it in my head, like Bulletproof Troop versus Chris Dickinson, like almost shoot style type match. I'm nerdy like that.
I'm nerdy like that too, honestly. That's cool that you could see that happening, or maybe something manifesting there. Maybe it's a possibility. I'm really excited about what the future holds with United Wrestling Network Primetime Live. It looks, the last episode I thought was tremendous. I thought it was really, really good. The one that I was just, all I did was cut a promo, but I thought the matches were like really, really good. I love any wrestling show now that's TV format, where they give the matches a lot of time, and they give the matches a lot of, just they give them time to build and tell a story, and it's less hokey BS and just more actual in-ring pro wrestling. Like I appreciate just some like basic, pre-taped promos, maybe some live stuff, no over-the-top angles. Like I think TV wrestling in general lately is just like so over the top with the angles, and it's been like that forever though, right? I'm now that I'm like a little older, it's like whatever patience I have for it is like, oh God. So I like watching solid pro wrestling.
No, I do too. And shout out to Dave Marquez and the rest of the United Wrestling Network crew, because they're doing stuff in, I believe it's like Tennessee, Arizona. They've got Championship Wrestling from Hollywood.
Yeah.
It's theoretically speaking, and especially now that there's iterations of like the NWA New Japan, right? And that's it. Lions Break. That's a Dave Marquez kind of co-production, and it's kind of cool because Dave was kind of ushering a new era of the NWA and a working relationship with New Japan back in the early 2000s. And now he gets to kind of do it all over again. And what you're seeing in the United Wrestling Network is kind of theoretically his vision for what he wanted the NWA to be.
Yeah, I mean, the production is top notch. I love the camera work. They don't do like the quick zoom in and out, kind of like WWE. Just beats to death with stuff. It's like, I can't say enough about the production values of the show. They made me my own theme song. They actually had a musician contact me, and they made me like my own theme song. And it's actually I thought it was going to be cheesy as hell. It's a really good song. So I was like, oh man, this is looking pretty serious. And like I said, the production, the whole crew, the commentators are all really, really good. It's just refreshing to see something that well done. I'm used to wrestling more so on the indies, and I don't really get to see myself in that capacity on, with those types of cameras. Somebody who's switching the angles, who's really, really good at it. So it's like, wow, it's like a good payoff to see like my work being captured in such a nice way. It looks really good. That's something to show to the kids. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's awesome because, already out the gate with United Wrestling Network and your debut there, you're kind of bettering, at least in terms of theme music, Chris Jericho's debut on WCW Worldwide, which was like a crapshoot version of Journey.
I liked that song. I liked all of Jericho's songs in WCW. That first one that was like doo, 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 doo. And then obviously the one that was basically even flow.
Yes.
Came out to the one that was even flow. I listen, Lionheart Chris Jericho is there's a reason why my name is Chris Dickinson. I took my name from Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden because like I liked how Jericho took his name from something that had to do with like heavy metal kind of. So I was kind of like juggling around between Chris Halford and Chris Dickinson. This is when I was like 16 too, or 17 years old, and I came up with this name, Chris Dickinson, and I just like ran with it when I really got into wrestling seriously. So it's, I don't know. Jericho is kind of an influence. I'm not gonna lie, a little bit. It's a little bit.
No, man, it's all good. And I mean, I love that that's where Dickinson comes from Bruce Dickinson, because you're talking to a dude at Inglewood High, me and my buddy, when we were reading Rime of the Ancient Mariner in class for a special like credit, we brought in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, right? And to listen to, and we listened to the whole damn thing. So, I mean, you're over with me 100%.
Yeah, I did that once in a class with Angel of Death, actually, the Slayers. I did. It's a funny story. And the class was actually, the teacher was a nun. And it's a funny story. Me and my friend, my best friend to this day, my friend Dom, we work out together. We still tell the story to this day of like me standing in front of the room with like my hands in my pockets while Angel of Death played in front of a classroom.
Hey, but it's those stories, that makes you a champion. And he says, Steven Tatum says, shout out to LA Champion.
La Champion.
Yeah.
He's my mom's favorite wrestler. My mom didn't know anything about wrestling until like 2 years ago when she started going to like my live events more consistently. And then she just decided like, her and my stepdad, let's buy WrestleMania. And then she started watching Raw every week and all that. And now she watches AEW because obviously I have a lot of friends that have been to like my mother's house, or just friends have been on wrestling shows. Everyone's at AEW, and my mom will watch it. And she like fell in love with Jericho. She like listens to his podcast, follows him on everything. It's so funny. It's hilarious.
But how cool is that? That you're, I mean, not only have you gotten to a place in your career that you're proud of, but also your mom too. That's got to be pretty cool.
My mom, I'm really blessed. I have a great family. My mom is really supportive. She's my biggest fan. So yeah. People can think that's lame. It is what it is,
Shout out to the moms, man. I mean, literally and figuratively, without them, we wouldn't be here. So, I mean, shout out to moms, right?
Yeah.
Now, in terms of your start, right? I mean, you started out as a kind of a backyard wrestler, so to speak, right? And we were kind of talking off air because, especially nowadays, like the backyard wrestler term, gets a bad rap, like, how did you start backyard wrestling?
Well, it's funny actually. It's actually really funny how it all kind of like ties together. I was into martial arts. I did karate as a kid, and where I went to karate, actually, there was a couple of kids that went to the same dojo, and I just was somehow the stars were aligned. My mother put me in this place, and it was a really, really good dojo. And I met a couple of kids there that were really into wrestling, and one of them is ended up being Jaka, my tag team partner for years. We were tag team champions in Evolve. We met when we were 7. And another kid that went to the same dojo is Sean Maluda, who's done a lot of stuff for like NXT.
Mm-hmm.
Just wrestled for AEW. He's his mother's sister married off of the Wild Samoan. So he used to say, my uncle is off of the Wild Samoan. And we used to be like, really? And we're like, so we used to play wrestling a lot. But we were doing karate. And we also learned judo. And we learned, like self-defense. Like, it was a pretty like well-rounded martial arts program that we were in. And we did it for years. I mean, I was there so I was probably from about maybe age 6 till about age 15. And we all were. And then we obviously were all super into wrestling as like young teenagers because this was like the late 90s and the early 2000s when wrestling was like white hot. So around 2001, my dad used to take me to wrestling shows. I used to go to ECW because ECW used to run where I grew up in Staten Island. And, you used to also be driving distance to like the Elks Lodge in Queens. And I used to go to shows, and obviously I was into ECW, and I was really like into what was going on with that. And then I started going on the internet. Obviously, I was really savvy with the computer and looking up stuff on the computer, so started to find out more about like all this wrestling that was going on. I actually learned so much about wrestling just from going on Rob Van Dam's own personal website, and that's how like I learned about Fire Pro Wrestling and things like that. But when it really started to manifest was 2001. The indie scene was kind of like taking off over here originally, and one of the places where ECW ran in Staten Island, this company called UCW came and ran a show with like Homicide, Low Key, The Amazing Red, Xavier, the SATs, the Hit Squad, the Boogie Nights, like all of those guys who were like the up and coming Northeast talent of the time who were going to go on to do the Ring of Honor and all that. We went to they had this show, and it was in like actually maybe sometime in the summer of 2001, and I met actually a couple of guys at the show that I ended up backyard wrestling with, all kids that were older than me, and my friend Sean, the kid who went to karate with me, knew some of these kids too. So we all kind of like linked up and started wrestling in a park together. And then we started going to Jersey All Pro Wrestling shows, which was kind of like right over the bridge in Bayonne from where I grew up. It's literally one bridge over. You're in the town, Bayonne, New Jersey, from where I live in Staten Island. So there was times actually there was a walkway. I walked over the bridge to go to Bayonne to get to the charity hall where the shows were. And that was ultimately where I started training, was in that building where they ran shows in Bayonne, the Jersey All Pro Wrestling School. I went to training for the first time. I got in a wrestling ring in like the winter, I'd say like maybe December of 2001. And then I started really going to town with training consistently in like the summer of 2002. And then I trained for a couple of months, did like really small like student shows, battle royal things, just like wrestling other kids that I trained with or things like that. Just nothing crazy. And I stuck around with it for maybe like a year and a half, 2 years. And then I kind of fell out of it. And then I got back into training and wanting to get serious about pro wrestling when I was maybe about like 20 years old. So there was like a break there for about 2.5 years where I didn't really do much, but I did train in martial arts. I did stuff like that. I kind of started like messing around in the weight room a little bit, and just growing up. I played music too, so I was in bands at the time, and that's like where my focus was at. I was just growing up, being a teenager, going to school. I started college after high school and all that, so I just wasn't really in the mindset to do wrestling, to go all in. And then I started I started watching things that I had missed on the indies from not watching it in like 2004 or 5, and I was just like, what the blown away when I started seeing like what was going on in Japan with Pro Wrestling Noah at the time. And I became like hooked like instantly, and I was like, oh man, like I found Kenta, right? Kenta was just kind of like making a name for himself, and like Marufuji, and that was all like, ah man, this is like blowing me away. I can't believe that this is it was like I thought it was so much better than what I originally saw from indie wrestling. I was like, this is what I want to be doing, and then I started getting real serious about wanting to be a pro wrestler.
I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome. And I mean, I'm a, ECW fan as well. And I mean, your kind of iteration in judo, I would have to think, a young Chris Dickinson would have, seen some of the throws like a Taz, right? Did, and the moves, the kata hajime, and go like, whoa, like this is some of the stuff that I'm doing in class.
Oh yeah.
Was there a watershed moment where you're like, aha?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. From before, I mean, even when I was like 12, 13 years old, I knew. I was like, we know how to do this, like take these falls, because it was at the time too where like the business was starting to get exposed a little bit. Remember that show where like they had like Dusty Rhodes with like a mask on showing people what to do or whatever? Remember that?
Right.
Whatever it was.
The exposing, yeah.
Or there was Beyond the Mat. There was all that stuff. So, if you want something so bad at that time, you're going to like do anything to try to see what it's about. And, we would pull the mats out at karate and just bump, learn, and take back bumps. And we all knew how to roll. So rolling came like easy, 3/4 rolls and things like that. We all knew how to break our falls. And we all knew like all the basic like submissions, arm bars, choke holds, guillotines, kimuras, things like that. We all like learned that stuff. So when you did see guys using it in wrestling, that's why I liked Rob Van Dam so much, because I was into kicks. I like the kicking, and I like the flashy flying around drop kicks and crazy spin kicks and stuff like that. I was into that. So that's why when I saw guys like I liked like Loki a lot originally. He was one of my favorites, Bryan Danielson. But when I finally saw like guy like Kenta, where like a ton of the offense was all with the roundhouse kicks based, and a lot of I was like, wow, this is what I want to be doing. These guys got the formula down and they're nailing it. But then it kind of like led me down the whole, because I was into already. I had already started with the tape trading when I was 14, 15. I found out about All Japan Pro Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling. I watched a lot of old WCW, NWA, WWF, ECW. FMW was huge around that time, getting all like into that stuff. So then it just made you go back and watch it again and appreciate even more and start to figure out who's really the best, what's really your favorite. And then over the years, it grows and manifests even more. The more you dive in, watch the same matches over again, start to discover more. And especially now, we just have everything at our fingertips with YouTube and Daily Motion and all the streaming services, the NJPW World. And you could go back and you could watch tons and tons of this stuff. And especially now, as I've grown as a pro wrestler, I've learned so much more. You appreciate it so much more because you can actually, you kind of know what's going on.
No, 1,000%. And I mean, gosh, I mean, when you mentioned Jersey All Pro, like I'm just like Jersey All Pro Worldwide. That was my ish. Like back in the day. I mean, it's funny because you mentioned Homicide, who will be competing as well at Josh Barnett's Bloodsport on October 11th. But I mean, the last part of that promo, the opening promo, is Jersey All Pro Worldwide, and fill in the blank. And it's something that has stuck in my head, and I think. Of course, ECW gets, so much praise because obviously they're under the WWE umbrella. But I think Jersey All Pro, as well as like EC, I think it was like
ECW.
ECWA or something like that.
ECWA, ECPWA, but ECWA was like the one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and MCW.
Great was tremendous. It was a tremendous tournament. They actually just had it. They had it again, and they've been having it. But back then, it was like really over. So it was people were really into ECWA. Listen, ultimately, it came down to Jersey All Pro was like ECW after ECW. They kind of like filled that void for the people in New York and New Jersey. They ran in Philadelphia. They had the hardcore thing going on, and then they started going with the more mat wrestling, pro wrestling, high flying type of thing. They changed it around because the New Jersey politicians were cracking down on them doing like death matches and stuff like that. And that's when the guys like low-key kind of got over. So they were really, really influential, especially their roster. Because if you look at Ring of Honor, and I spent years traveling with Gabe because I worked for him with Evolve, and I heard all the stories and how they put it all together. Jersey All Pro Wrestling, they took so much from Jersey All Pro Wrestling, the whole roster basically, and then they sprinkled in like the guys from the Texas Wrestling Academy, Shawn Michaels' students, and that was the original Ring of Honor. But Jersey All Pro Wrestling were like the trendsetters. So and they were, I mean, consistently month by month by the mid 2000s doing like 800 people a show, which is huge numbers for nowadays. People don't realize, like, 400, 300, 200 people's a lot. But back then they were doing at least like 600 to 800, sometimes 1,000 show. I wrestled on some Jersey All Pro shows towards the late 2000s, early 2000s, where there was like 1,200 people there, which is a big house for an indie. So, I mean, Jersey All Pro, it was over. And they just have a special place in the whole history of the way everything panned out.
No, 1,000%. And I mean, I remember, being in high school actually with Stephen Tatum and like reading in between classes, PWIs and The Wrestler, and seeing, like still, like George Napolitano's still, photographs of Jersey All Pro shows and whatever. And just looking at it, it was just like, because here on the West Coast, we had like, especially in LA, we had XPW, but to me, in my head, okay, XPW is selling out kind of similar, arenas in terms of, the capacity sizes,
Yeah.
600, 800, 1,200. So again, it's one of those that I really feel don't get the just due, in today's day and age. But kids nowadays, those whippersnappers, it tends to become a little bit of like a bastardization of it. Like, we'll only remember like the last show, but not 3 shows behind it, let alone 3 to 10 years before it.
Yeah. Ring of Honor kind of like stole Jersey All Pro's heat, and now people, it's just Ring of Honor. It's like, I don't even, the last like year or two, you didn't really hear too many people even talking about Ring of Honor as far as like being like the it wrestling promotion anymore. It was kind of like they kind of got cooled off a bit, and yeah, Jersey All Pro is special, and I used to like the West Coast indies a lot. That was like one of the first things I got into when I started tape trading, because I was such a big fan of Samoa Joe, and I started buying Samoa Joe tapes. I really liked Super Dragon too, and I would buy their tapes off of like RF Video, and I started seeing like West Coast indies before before Samoa Joe even came to Ring of Honor. And then I had discovered. Honestly, the first time I saw 01 Pro Wrestling was because of a Samoa Joe compilation. So it's all those tapes were like gateways to other things, and it wasn't wrestling wasn't as disposable as it is now, because if you saw something, you were like, whoa, I don't know what this is. I've only seen it on this one tape. There's got to be more of it. It's obviously happening somewhere. And you see like, oh, there's a lot of people in the crowd. It kind of, wrestling was a lot. There was a lot more mystery and mystique to everything that went on back then, because you technically had to have you had to own the footage. You had to have a piece of it in some capacity. So you had to get it from someone, and there used to be the tape trading guys were the most important. Like, I don't know if you remember the guy George Mayfield. Do you remember him?
Yes.
Okay, George
100%.
Mayfield is responsible for me learning about Japanese wrestling, period, because he used to set up his stuff at the shows and he used to go up to the table and used to say, like, okay, well, I know what I like. I like this. I like this. I remember I said one time in particular, I want to see crazy suplexes and head drops. And he was like, okay. He gave me this tape that pretty much set the course of my entire wrestling career. It was 1994, my career year, the best of Dr. Death Steve Williams and All Japan Pro Wrestling. And like, you know, I still have that tape to this day, and I have a lot of tapes that I bought from George. I'd go up to him and be like, I want to see New Japan junior weights from the 90s. And I'd be like, I have like $100. And he'd just like hook me up with this giant stack of VHS tapes of all matches that were really important. I guess he was just like a wealth of knowledge. So it was like those are the guys you wanted to sponge off of. I'm a super nerd, obviously. So it's funny. Like we talk about these things, getting like thread conversations on Twitter sometimes, like other people who were around in the scene back then about buying those tapes and learning about that stuff through people like George, you know what I mean? And other guys who would make compilation videotapes. I mean, I remember when I was like 12 or 13, I asked my brother to use his credit card to buy a tape off of eBay. It was the best of Sting in NWA and WCW that somebody just like made. Like, you couldn't go, people don't realize that in 2000 and 2001, you couldn't go in Sam Goody or like a Music Land or a Tape World and buy a compilation tape of something from like 10 years prior. It's just, maybe they'd have like a big line of all the pay-per-views. Maybe I could find like Bash at the Beach 94, 93, 92 if I'm lucky, but I'm not going to find like the match with Ric Flair and Sting from the Clash of the Champions in 1987. It's just not, you're not going to find that. You couldn't buy that in a store. And I'm a 12-year-old kid that's reading about it on the internet, but it wasn't like we could stream videos. It wasn't, and if you could download something, and nobody was putting that stuff up to download, and it would take hours. You know, we didn't have high-speed internet, so you had to go and buy compilation tapes. And I remember the first time I bought that shit is when I saw, because I had seen the Great Muta in WCW, but like for the NW, there was a couple of things in the NWO. I was like, oh, I know this guy. But that was when I saw the Great Muta in like 1988, 1989 in the NWA, because it had all those matches on it with like teaming with Terry Funk, Dick Slater versus Sting versus Ric Flair, all that stuff, Buzz Sawyer. And that stuff was like mind-blowing to me. And the Great Muta was the Great Muta. I mean, I live vicariously through the Great Muta. It's it, like still to this day. So you think about like the effects that that shitty ripped VHS tape had on me as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old kid. I mean, I'm still basically reeling in it this many years later. That's how important, going back to, that's how important accessing the footage was. That's how important the footage was back then. If you got your hands on something, it meant something. It really was like special, you know. It wasn't just like you clicked on a video and watched it.
Oh yeah, 100%. And as Steve Tatum kind of echoes our sentiments, shout out to all the people who own those collections and are uploading them to YouTube. Yeah, 100%.
That, like, all of the people on YouTube. I mean, like, these people are still teaching me about pro wrestling. Like the last year, I've gotten so into the Joshi stuff. Like I was always kind of into it, but not like now I'm like a super hardcore nerd about it. I watch it every day. And it's like between the people from Japan that upload it, and you wouldn't even know how to find it unless you knew how to, you know, type it in Japanese, or you just stumble along a video that takes you along a path of other videos. So then you subscribe or whatever. But to all the people that upload that stuff, I mean, the All Japan stuff, forget about it. New Japan now you can't, because you got new NJPW World, which is amazing, and it's money well spent. But the people that upload the All Japan stuff is insane. I watch full seasons, full episodes every week to week of All Japan Pro Wrestling TV. You see shit you never even knew existed, like Tom Brandy's All Japan Pro Wrestling run in 1994. You know, it's like you'll find things you didn't even know happened.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, those are the I mean, All Japan under Baba. I mean, that's where Brody went. That's where the Funks went. That's where Stan Hansen went. You know, all of the top guy gene. I mean, Inoki didn't get them till a little bit later. You know,
Yeah.
but Baba was.
Inoki had his guys though. Inoki had his guys. One guy that doesn't get anywhere near enough due. I put him over as much as I can because nobody talks about him that much. And it's well, they do. He's huge, obviously, but I always like will tag him just to make sure like he knows he's the man. It's Scott Norton. Scott Norton is like the most underrated American gaijin wrestler that was on like in the big time in a big position. I mean, that guy had a consistent job with New Japan Pro Wrestling for like at least like 13 years. He won the world title, he won the tag titles, and he still had a job with WCW the whole time, basically. And he must have made buku bucks, did whatever the hell he wanted. And he was always like in a great spot. I mean, who had it better than that guy? And he never had to work for WWF. So, I mean, I love that guy. I'm a huge fan. And he's so underrated. If you go and watch his matches, he was not just your average big man. He really knew how to work. He did.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. And I mean, you know, when you talk about like, you know, that era of like Bison Smith and like, I mean, here in LA, and it's funny because like KDOC is the local station here that actually plays championship wrestling from Hollywood. But back in like my high school days, you had a 3-hour block at like the butt crack of dawn Sunday morning, like late Saturday night, but technically Sunday morning. And you had UPW that had, you know, like John Cena, Samoa Joe, what have you. Then you had XPW with like Supreme and Joey Chaos, Munoz, and what have you. And then you got the creme de la creme. You got ECW after it. So it was like a 3-hour block, and just seeing those guys. And I mean, big guys who could move. You know, Bison Smith is another one. There's my goodness, what's it? Gary Albright. Oh my God! If you want to see a big man who moves, Gary fucking Albright.
Real quick too. He's just once he gets his hands on you, there's no stopping where you're gonna go.
No, man. I mean, in terms of like some of the awesome memories that you had of going to ECW and Jersey All Pro live events, like what were some of the matches that stood out to you? Who were some of the wrestlers that stood out to you?
I got to see Rob Van Dam and Sabu versus the Eliminators when I was like 9 years old. Right in my hometown. I got to see Sid show up at ECW at the Elks Lodge in Queens and put John Cronus through a table. I got to meet Rob Van Dam and Bill Alfonso, and I just was on like a show with Bill Alfonso, and I was marking out hard for him, and I told him about how me and my dad waited online forever to meet him. It's cool that I got to like work with guys from ECW. Like I got to wrestle Tommy Dreamer a couple of times. I got to like ride with Tommy Dreamer a bunch. Rhino's a really cool guy. I got to work with him. The Sandman, I've done some stuff with him, even though he doesn't do much. Like these are all guys I literally idolized. Oh, I wrestled Sabu once. That was interesting. I got to see Sabu do a lot of cool shit. I was there when there was the famous ECW riot in Staten Island at the Sports Fest where I grew up because a fan like spit on Bubba Ray Dudley and Bubba Ray Dudley pushed a fan, and I was there with my dad, and my dad was my dad was like me and my dad were standing up against a wall watching all of this happen, and my dad was like, "Look at these fucking assholes!" Like it was really funny. Don't be that guy.
Did you guys make it out? I mean, was that your dad signaling like, let's get out?
We made it out. It was a big place.
Fucking tremendous. I think that's awesome, man. And
yeah. I mean, my dad was cool. My dad, shout out to my dad. My dad was smarting me up about pro wrestling, and he didn't even really like it that much. Like he liked it, but he was just smart. Like he knew what he was watching and how to explain it right. Like I'll never, ever, ever forget. It was actually, we were watching the TV in my parents' bedroom, watching Monday Nitro, and I was like sitting on the floor and he was sitting in a chair and we were watching TV. And Eddie Guerrero was wrestling or Chris Benoit was wrestling. and he was like, "These guys are the good guys. These guys are good wrestlers. These guys are really good wrestlers." And he was like, the other show we were talking about Monday Night Raw. He was like, all they do is talk shit. They're just talking shit. He liked it sometimes, but like he would say they talk too much shit. And I remember him pointing out to me specifically, and I mean this. This is a true story. I remember we had to do it. Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. He was like, these guys are the good wrestlers. These are the guys you got to watch if you want to be a pro wrestler. I don't know if they just were able to convince even a casual 50-year-old man that like pro wrestling was good, that their pro wrestling was good, but he believed it. You know what I mean? And he kind of like passed that knowledge on to me. He liked like Ric Flair a lot. Obviously, Ric Flair. That was around the time when I started to realize like Ric Flair was the best wrestler ever. You know. Started to figure that all out, you know. So it was a good time to be a pro wrestling fan in the late 90s. It was the best.
No, 100%. I mean, and even the early 90s. So my introduction to combat sports as a whole was, I mean, I was to Saturday night's main event, Hart versus Randy Savage. Yeah. And I think that was like August. And it's just, I mean, the match, I think, goes through like 2, possibly 3 segments. It's just a beautiful match. Yeah. And it's just, I mean, those were my 2. So whatever Bret Hart did, whatever anybody from, the Dungeon did, or whatever Savage did, that was my barometer of what was cool and what was not.
Randy Savage was a god around here because he lived here. He lived where I grew up. He lived in Staten Island in the 80s. So, like, you could go to places now and Randy Savage's picture will still be on the wall. His 8x10 from, like, 1985 or 1986. And he used to go to, like, this specific pizzeria, or he used to go to this diner. And he's, like, famous for having gone there with Miss Elizabeth. And people in the gyms the old guys will all tell you, oh, I used to see Randy Savage. Jimmy Snuka used to come in here and all that. So, I mean, WWF, I mean, that's how I got into wrestling, obviously. I mean, you ain't going to tell me. WWF from like 1985 to 1992 is the best. It is like, I mean, just being a total mark or whatever, being a nerd specific about times. I mean, obviously, I got into it and probably like when I was like 5 years old in like 1992. Okay. But when you go back and having watched it all, it was peaking at that point. Like when Ric Flair was in the company and that whole angle and all that stuff going on, when they all were there at one point, there's just, it was untouchable, And then I grew up more so with Bret Hart as the champion, which was, and Owen Hart's in my top 10. So that's, I love old WWF, but WCW just did it for me. I don't know what it was, but WCW kind of like swayed me to the other side. I think it was a combination of, obviously, I love Hulk Hogan. So they took Hulk Hogan, and then it was like all the other guys that you saw from WWF that were still there on top, like Ravishing Rick Rude. I really loved Vader. I love Sting, obviously. And then once they and when I was a little kid, all that Dungeon of Doom 94, 95 shit, you still watched it. It wasn't that bad. I loved the Giant. Forget it. I loved the Giant. I have a poster from a indie show I went to. It was like maybe one of the first shows I ever went to with my dad. And actually the first show I ever went to, I met Bam Bam Bigelow. It was like right after he got released from WWF. And I met Bam Bam Bigelow, and I went in the ring, and I took a picture with him, and I jumped up on the second rope and like posed, like pointed to my dad, kind of like and my grandpa was there too, and the crowd like the Macho Man, and some guy who I guess worked for the promotion was like, get down from there. I'll never forget it. But I one of those shows, the first shows I went to, I have a WCW Giant poster actually. I loved the Giant. He was badass.
Oh, he was tremendous, especially like early, in his career where, I mean, this dude was 7 foot tall doing drop kicks off the top rope, like missile drop kicks. Like, holy shit.
Dude, wrestling in like 1996, 1997 was like, it was on a completely different level. It was like people have no idea how good TV wrestling was because like I loved, Razor Ramon. That was like, he was my favorite guy from the WWF. So then when he showed up in WCW, and all that shit started going down. It was just like this is going places. And then Hogan turned bad. Like, it's come on, man. There's no touching it.
Which, yeah, I mean, Stephen Tatum wants to know, what was your view on that moment, that bash at the beach, when Hogan finally turns heel? Like,
I
what was your reaction?
I like bad guys. I like bad guys, first of all, and I love Razor Ramon. Diesel was like, I'm not, listen, whatever. I shouldn't say it because it'll probably hurt my chances, but I'm not, I wasn't a Shawn Michaels fan. So I didn't really, I was disgusted when like Shawn Michaels won the title at like WrestleMania. Like I liked Bret Hart, I didn't like Shawn Michaels. So Diesel was like, I thought he was like okay, but obviously Shawn Michaels did a number on my boy Razor Ramon too. Like he fucked all my favorites. The British Bulldog, forget it. The British Bulldog lost the Royal Rumble. I cried. I had one of those like NFL rage out, smash the TV moments, like because they swerved us, and I was like a little kid, so my feelings were really, really hurt. And but so when I saw like Scott Hall and like Razor Ramon and Hulk Hogan were gonna like be on the same team, like I thought it was so good, and like the Macho Man played such a good like sympathetic piece of shit babyface around that time. Like he would always get beat up and stuff. Like I don't know, wrestling was just so good. Hollywood Hogan was just as good, if not better, than Hogan's original run. It was the best. It may have kind of quick, but it was like for about a good year and a half there till I'd say probably like the peak of the NWO was like that middle of 1997. Like Slamboree, 1997, around that when WCW was still going over, like that match with Kevin Green, and
yes.
Do you remember that match?
Yes.
Go and watch that match with Kevin Green and Ric Flair. I think it's Slamboree, 97. It's like Kevin Green, Ric Flair, Roddy Piper versus Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and 6. The crowd is like absolutely insane, and they're in like Charlotte, I think, and the baby faces go up clean, and it's like this is when you see stuff like that from the era, you're like, this is how it should have been all along. But then they just started the heels stopped showing ass completely, so it's like when the heels stop showing ass, it's like you're done. It is this ain't gonna go nowhere anymore, you know?
Yeah, and especially, I mean, when you talk about Razor being your guy, and I mean, there were times it's not. I mean, this doesn't age well, but I mean, I remember the first time I saw the Razor's Edge, and I was like, I told my sister who's younger than me, like by 3 years, I was like, come here, fucking Razor's Edge to the bed. Not again. It doesn't age well, but I mean, what a badass he was, because we saw the presentation in the WWF, but when he walks onto Nitro that first time through the crowd, and he has that all fucking denim, the denim vest. He looks fucking jacked. You know, the
coolest guy
ever.
Yeah, he's the coolest guy ever. He pretty much is like Scott Hall's the most important person in the explosion of pro wrestling. It wasn't Steve Austin. I mean, I love Steve Austin, but really, like that NWO shit, I think was the reason like wrestling really kicked off, because you finally had two things that were going at the same time that were dope. And in WWF, I mean, like if you really want to watch really dope WWF from that time, just watch. I mean, I love WrestleMania 12 because of like the backlot brawl. That's like one of my favorite matches ever. I loved everything like Goldust was doing around that time, because it was so like weird and crazy to me. But like, if you really want to watch WWF's ascension to being great, I think go and watch from the Raw when Bret Hart returns after his sabbatical after WrestleMania 12, and it's like Steve Austin's already got like the shit kicked into high gear. He's like a total maniac. Brian Pillman is there. Austin's raising hell. He hates Bret Hart, and then the whole build into WrestleMania 13 is just incredible. And then obviously WrestleMania 13 was incredible. So it just wrestling at the whole time period, everything was just coming together. It was so good.
I agree. I mean, it was. I mean, fuck. When most people talk about like the first Nitro, like what match, one moment stands like head and shoulders above the rest for me, fucking Pillman versus Jushin Thunder Liger. That, oh fuck, man.
Yeah,
Ugh.
Liger. See, all those guys. Listen, there's a reason why I got so into Japanese wrestling and became such a mark for all that stuff because of WCW, and WWF too, because WWF trickled in those things over the years, and from those little trickles of guys being there from Japan, from Mexico, that international flair, ECW too, ECW the most because of Masato Tanaka, but
Yes.
because of that stuff. It made you want to see more of it. So it was like you only got a little bit, you wanted to see more. And that's what drove the 12-year-old in me crazy, was seeing like the great Sasuke on WWF or seeing Jushin Thunder Liger in WCW or the great Muda in WCW. It's like, I need to see more of this. Like, because you didn't think maybe when you were that young that those guys would have such a profound impact on like your entire life. But they ended up having that much of an impact on you.
No, man. Oh, and I love that you mentioned Masato Tanaka because again, that's one of those names that I think is lost in the fodder. Everybody is like that WWE whatever, and he didn't have a run in the WWE, so people forget about him. But
he had the best match to ever take place in
Tanaka.
a WWE ring. The ECW One Night Stand match with Mike Awesome was the ultimate statement of fuck you. We're gonna like, you're not getting any better than that in a WWE produced product. I don't give a fuck. That match, there ain't nothing topping it. There ain't nothing following it. There ain't nothing that's outdoing the One Night Stand match with Mike Awesome and Masato Tanaka. There's just two guys that don't give a fuck. And Masato Tanaka is the nicest dude ever on the face of the earth. He's somebody I could call an actual friend of mine. And you don't understand what an honor that is to me because I love this guy. He is still in impeccable shape and condition. He's 50 or 51. He still looks better than he looks as good as he did 20 years ago, if not better. He's ripped. He looks young. And you got to think about like all the shit the guy's gone through. But these Japanese people, they got crazy good genetics. So, I mean, and he got the luck of the draw. He is still killing it. Like, I was on a 0-1 show with him in Japan. He got me on the show. He invited me to go. He booked my match. The whole deal. I watched him wrestle in the main event, and he absolutely burned it down. I mean, the guy is still going. He's had multiple runs where he still proves that he could go with anybody, even in, like, his older age. He had a sick New Japan run. He's the best. He's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. There's no denying Masato Tanaka is one of the best ever and one of the most influential, too. I mean, think about, like, he had a great run in America, which not a lot of Japanese wrestlers can say that they've had. So he's done that as well as his legacy in Japan, and he's so humble. I went out to eat with him one time, and we were sitting there and we're talking shit, and I was like, you don't understand how much of an impact or how over FMW still is with people in America. They eat that shit up, and it's like, yeah, people make tons of bootleg merchandise, and like FMW is still very popular with circles of wrestling fans, and he can't believe it. Somebody like him, he's like, really? Like, he doesn't get it. He doesn't get like what an impact he had. So you're right. He's not somebody. He doesn't get nearly enough credit, but he is. Where he's from, though, he does. He's very well respected, and he's a legend, without a doubt. And there's no slowing him down. He's still going.
No, 1,000%, 1,000%. Now, I mean, I gotta ask, where did that match with Tanaka happen?
It happened for Black Craft Wrestling. My match with him. I wrestled him at Black Craft Wrestling, WrestleMania weekend, on the show that like everybody's like went over time and went to shit or whatever. But we did have a really good match, and people still say it was a really good match. But that was when we had our singles match, and it was awesome. I got to wrestle Masato Tanaka. It was my dream come true. If Black Craft Wrestling existed for any reason, it was to put that match together and to have it, and it was dope. I'm very thankful for Black Craft Wrestling for letting us do that match, and it was great. It linked me up with him, and I became friends with him after that. So then when I went to Japan, I got to work for 01 Pro Wrestling, and I got to go out to eat sushi with Masato Tanaka and like some of his close friends. And it was like one of the best experiences of my life. I got to hang out with this guy that I've basically I rip off Masato Tanaka in my own comeback as Masato Tanaka's comeback. That was one of those like, all right, I guess I did everything I had to do to get to this point. This is money can't buy this. You know what I mean? So some things are bigger than fame and money, and that was one of them. Was being able to I went to Masato Tanaka's friend's sushi bar, and it was closed, and it literally was me, him, Matthew Justice came, and it was three other guys that are close friends of his, not involved in wrestling, and we just sat there for like hours and drank beer and ate the best sushi I've ever eaten in my life. And Masato Tanaka hooked it all up. He was the man. He is the best.
Could there be a better Japanese experience for a gaijin? Could there be?
Definitely up there. That was one of the best moments of my life. So I don't know. They're gonna have to. I guess I'm gonna have to like go to the bathhouse or something, or go fishing with Minoru Suzuki, or like do something with Kenta Kobashi next. I don't know. I don't know how to top that one. That one was unreal.
I don't know. You put it out into the universe, and I just think once you do that, people listen. I'm just saying. So
you gotta will these things into existence.
Absolutely. Now, Stephen Tatum actually asked something that I wanted to ask you. Thus far in your career, what has been the favorite arena? It could be the physical location, it could be the crowd, but what's your favorite arena in your career thus far?
I mean, there's definitely like so many. I really like I wrestled at the theater at Madison Square Garden for AAA, which was like unbelievable. That was like unreal because I grew up in New York City. So the next step is, I guess, the real Madison Square Garden. But I was sold out theater at MSG, pretty dope. Korakuen Hall is sick. The fans in Japan are the absolute best. Shinkiba first ring. The fans in Japan are just number one. But I got to wrestle in the Auditorio Tijuana, which is like a really, really, really famous lucha libre venue in Tijuana. I wrestled for AAA there. In America, I really like the House of Independence where GCW runs is pretty dope. I like the spot. I wrestled for PWG at the Reseda VFW Hall, or whatever that was.
Yeah,
I've wrestled for some good ones, but the ones I mentioned in the beginning are obviously the best. Speaking of,
how did it?
Speaking of,
go ahead.
Getting together with legends, I'm supposed to get together with Barnett next week for like the whole week. We're hanging out in LA for like an entire week, and we're gonna train to get ready for the Bloodsport event. And obviously, he's got a bare knuckle fight coming up in Poland. So it's obviously he had to call the toughest dude he knows to go out there and to teach him a few things about taking care of himself. So I'm gonna go out and train with Barnett for a week in Poland. Not in Poland, in LA.
That's not bad. It's not bad at all. I mean, and the cool thing about Barnett is like he's got UWF USA, right? And he essentially trains all of his students in both catch wrestling, MMA, and pro wrestling. So, like, if you're in his camp, and Shayna Baszler is kind of proof positive because that was one of his pupils. So you're gonna be in for a good time, 100%.
Yeah, I'm gonna get chewed up and spit out. Like I haven't trained that extensively in martial arts or any sort of like thing like that in a long time. It's been like a few years, so I'm looking forward to it. I'm definitely gonna learn a couple things. I'm sure I'm gonna learn a lot, and I'll get to spend some time with the OG legend himself, Josh Barnett. I mean, it's pretty crazy. That's another one where it's like he texts me or he calls me on the phone, and it's like, the fuck, like this guy's calling me. I was like, this Josh Barnett. Like I used to get together to watch Pride DVDs with my friend Jaka when we were like in high school. This is like one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time. So to be able to sit and pro wrestling, forget about it. The guy is a genius. To be able to have that learning tree so close to me, and to have that have a kind of an entry into his mind whenever I feel like it, to be honest, is like one of the best things that money can't buy. It's one of those things where it's just pro wrestling will open doors for you to have relationships with people. And it's so much more than just, what can this person do for you? No, that's whatever. It's about like, this guy loves pro wrestling so much. He understands pro wrestling on a completely different level. His idea of pro wrestling is so much better than what a lot of people really think about pro wrestling. And me and him are on the same page. You know what I mean? We share a lot of the same ideas, and we share a lot of the same beliefs about in pro wrestling and what it can be, what it is really, and what it can be. And that's why I think we get along so well, and why I'm looking so forward to this upcoming Bloodsport event.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And it's kind of a funny story. The first time that I met Barnett, I was covering Combate Americas event, MMA promotion, and I was just like, dude, I saw this dude. He had like Dickies, Chucks, and like this cool Iron Maiden like Harajuku t-shirt, and I was like, that's cool, right? Like, I'm gonna talk to that dude to see where he got that shirt.
He's just the coolest guy on the face of the earth. He just likes heavy metal and Japanese pro wrestling, just like me. That's why we're the coolest. Listen, we're just a different breed. We're a breed apart. It's just
same. Yeah. So when it's funny, so he was sitting on the chair, he gets up, and I'm like, oh shit, it's Barnett, right? And then I think I asked, and here's the reporter guy, right? Like, can I get a picture? He's like, yeah. And I was like, dude, big fan. Tell me what it's like to train with Antonio Inoki. And he goes, and there's this like fucking long, awkward pause. And I was like, oh shit, I fucking pissed off the War Master. Fuck, right? And then he goes, nobody's ever asked me that. And then like I was like, oh shit, I'm in. We're good. We're good.
Yeah. I was really like, me and Barnett didn't really get off on the right foot at first. Kinda. Like, I was like scraping and clawing for GCW to use me consistently at like the end of 2018, going to like 2019, and Bloodsport was coming, and I had done the event prior, and then Brett, who the promoter of GCW, told me Barnett didn't think I was believable enough, or said something along those lines, and it's like, I lost jobs in pro wrestling from being too believable, or for people thinking that my shit is too real. And I was like pissy, and I wasn't sure if he really knew what I was about. So I like talked to him. And then I remember when I showed up to that Bloodsport in Jersey, I was like, yo, I had to wrestle Andy Williams, who's like a friend of mine too. But I was like, listen, man, just go out there and swing, and we'll see what happens. But I was not about to be defied. I don't give a shit if fucking Antonio Inoki himself told me I don't think you're believable. No way, no chance in hell. So then I guess eventually when Moxley pulled out of that other event, Josh chose me to wrestle. So then I got to get in the ring with the babyface assassin myself, which was a really, really dope experience. I'll never forget that night. That was a great weekend for me overall, but that match was really special to me. And I believe in relationships like that. I believe respect should be earned. I believe, especially when it comes to real men, we're man's men or whatever. Like not trying to sound cheesy or anything like that, but sometimes you gotta raise your hand and be like, hey, like, yeah, you should pay attention to me. Hey, yeah, I am really good. Like, hey, do I have to prove it to you? Not everything in this world is given, even though it seems like sometimes it is. I know a lot of people love to like play this whole game on social media. Oh, we know wrestling's fake. We're all just performers. This is my stage name. This is this. Yeah, I get it. Okay, we all get it. Okay, we get it. But like, have some fucking respect for the business. You know what I mean? I hate to sound like one of those old salty veterans, but like, it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that. Have some respect for the art of professional wrestling. You know, and I think that's ultimately why me and Josh kind of came together and we have a friendship. It's because we both respect pro wrestling for what it can be and what it really is. And yeah, like you mentioned that name, Antonio Inoki. Let's go back to martial arts based pro wrestling and what it was, what the idea of where the idea of MMA even originated is from New Japan Pro Wrestling and the UWF, and a lot of that building over the years to UWFI, to Pancrase, to Shuto, to all of these different incantations, is that the word, or these different versions of what it was eventually inevitably going to become. Then the UFC started, then Pride started. I think then when Pride started, that was the exclamation point of what MMA was going to be going forward. The UFC just kind of saw what they did and then got it right after that. But it had to go through all of those stages, and it all goes back. It all goes back to Antonio Inoki. And for Josh, you have been chosen to pro wrestle, handpicked by someone like Antonio Inoki, and then trained in the New Japan Dojo. He didn't have much formal training in pro wrestling before he went out there and just did it. And I'm talking not just went out there and did it. He didn't have like a warm-up mat. He wrestled at the Tokyo Dome against Nagata. So it's like you either got it or you don't. Pro wrestling is that's nowadays, like, these guys got days, they got weeks to rehearse stuff. They're rehearsing stuff over and over and over again. Pro wrestling obviously has many different styles. It's subjective. People like what they like. But I mean, that's the pro wrestling I'm interested in. It's like, here, man, you just learned how to kind of like take care of business last night. You go wrestle in front of 50,000 people now. I don't know. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I mean, Barnett is probably one of the, if not the most decorated heavyweight of all time, because I mean, he's got a Metamoris, grappling title, Halleck Gracie is who created, Metamoris. All right. So he's got that heavyweight title. He's got the IWGP third belt. He's got the UFC championship, heavyweight championship. He's got the King of Pancrase championship. And there's probably a couple that I'm missing out on, but I mean, he's got to be one of the most decorated heavyweights in combat sports history.
Yeah, he's a legend. I hate to catch the guy's ass, but it is what it is. If you worked for all that, and if you earned all that, you earn the right for people to talk about you in such high regard. So, it is what it is. He's the perfect guy to be putting on the show. He's the perfect guy to have his name on the event. He's the perfect guy to be promoting the event and to be choosing the wrestlers and to be booking the matches and to be involved. It's because he's a legend. He's not just an MMA fighter. Because no disrespect to a great martial artist. There's a lot of great MMA fighters that get involved in pro wrestling, but we're talking about a guy who is very decorated and a guy who has made an impact on the sport and is a legend. But he also is a pro wrestler and he loves pro wrestling. He's not someone who's in pro wrestling to get something out of it, which is kind of like what it seems like a lot of the MMA guys get involved in it, or they have to kind of like find themselves as pro wrestlers. Some of them takes a little bit more time. A lot of guys think that anyone thinks that they can do it, but he really is almost like a pro wrestler first. And he used to say when he was an MMA fighter, they used to announce him as he's a pro wrestler. He used to represent pro wrestling, so that's huge, especially back then. Fighting for the believability of pro wrestling. That's what, again, you want to go back to Antonio Inoki. You want to go back to, Akira Maeda. You want to go back to Fujiwara and Takada and those guys. That's what it's all about. That was what it was all about. You know what I mean? Proving that pro wrestling was an actual real combat sport. And obviously things got fucked up along the way somewhat, but hey man, we're artists. We could do what we want, you know?
No, 100%. And that's why I am so glad and so honored that Bloodsport is here. And he is the guy, Josh Barnett, right? The first iteration of Bloodsport, Matt Riddle, who's gone on to WWE, right? But I mean, he's the perfect guy, right? So, I mean, October 11th, that's a couple weeks away. What are people going to expect out of the Dirty Daddy, Chris Dickinson?
I mean, I'm so ready. I mean, let me be honest with you. From the last couple of months, even with the not wrestling a full schedule, I've trained my ass off and I've worked really hard to make sure that I stayed on point for any opportunity that came because I knew eventually things were going to start turning around. Okay? So that's one thing. Watching wrestling. I've watched more wrestling in the last 7 months than I've watched in my entire life. And I've been able to apply it to my matches in recent times. So my style has evolved. And I've definitely adapted a more old school 80s Inoki influence, UWF influence, submission based style, which is I can mix it up either way. But I've definitely been more efficient at picking and choosing body parts, staying on it, and telling stories around body parts and working around submissions and taking my opponents apart like limb by limb and staying focused, being extremely focused about like my game plan, which is something that you really need to be when you wrestle and have limited options as far as we're in a ring with no ropes. So like I said, it's subjective. Everybody has their own style, has their own opinion of the way things should be done. I kind of wanted to tighten up certain things about my game, and I do that by watching wrestling. That's really how I do it because, you know, unfortunately, we haven't been able to get into the ring as much or get into training or go to jiu-jitsu class or go to any sort of grappling or martial arts training. The last few months, things have been shut down. The gym's just recently opened. Fortunately for me, I had access to a real gym the whole time because, you know, I wasn't going to let that not happen. I have to stay in shape. But what I mean, I'm saying I'm on point, and I'm going to go spend a week out there with Josh training. I'm going to be even more dangerous. I'm going to be even more fluid. I'm going to be even more on point because I'm hungry, man. I'm dying. I had things in the palm of my hand before all this shit happened. I mean, I was really doing great. I'm not just blowing smoke. I mean, I was doing tremendous. And I had so many opportunities taken away from me, big matches to make a statement. I'll be honest. I'm trying to work for New Japan Pro Wrestling. And I had statement matches with Shingo, with Minoru Suzuki to really be able to present to New Japan, you know, and that was taken away from me. So I'm pissed off. I'm full of piss and vinegar, and I want to be better than ever. I want to be in better shape than ever. I want my conditioning to be better than ever. I want my wrestling to be better than ever. And I think that's what Bloodsport is all about. And the fact that you have limited resources in the ring, there's no rope. You have to. It's either you get it done or you can't. I love wrestling with no ropes. At first it was a little odd to me. At first I didn't understand it as well as I do now. But now, after having done it so many times and having, you know, added so much more to my style or started to adapt to a different style of pro wrestling through just watching it and educating myself and being a fan, and I feel like I prefer to even wrestle without the ropes, to be honest. So, Bloodsport, I think that you're going to see the best version of me you've ever seen at Bloodsport this time.
Whoo, damn! I get it. I was mentioning it to Barnett earlier. I was like, why can't it be October 11th already? Because I'm fucking hyped. Fuck more. I mean, Mojo Rawley says, stay hyped. I'm fucking hyped for this card. Like 100%. Like that's all I've been watching is it's Bloodsport and New Japan because it's just what I love as a.
New Japan seems like it's been great the last couple of days. I have to catch up on it, but some of the matches look dope. That one with Jay White and Ibushi looked crazy.
Yes, the G1 is fucking phenomenal this year. I actually posted a meme. Like it's essentially my sleep schedule and the G1, and it's like getting the fucking like rough shot because I mean you're kind of getting it no lube if you're. I mean I can only imagine what it must be there on the East Coast, but on the West Coast it's pretty damn fucking rough. But it is so worth it. Oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah. New Japan don't fuck around, and it's so inspiring. It's so inspiring to see that they're already doing these arenas at like half capacity. And I mean, it's like, dude, this country got their shit together. They got this shit together. This company has their shit together long before we got our shit together. It is just like, can you just put me in a box and send me over there at this point? Like, I want to go back. I want to go back. It's like, it's inspiring to me. And if that's not like, if you're a pro wrestler and wrestling is what you're all about, you know, not bullshit. If you don't want to be over there, then why are you in the business? You know, it's just that's the way I look at it. It's a harsh point of view, but yeah, it is what it is.
I agree. I fucking agree, dude. Like I said, I mean, we've had of yours before this, but like so much more now. And I cannot wait till October 11th. Now, obviously, dude, there's been so many people that have, you know, shared your dream and your vision. You know, I want you to get some shout outs out of the way, like people who have supported you. So take as long as you need, my man.
Supported me. I mean, let's talk about the show and let's talk about GCW and talk about Bloodsport. I mean, I think by far one of my biggest supporters, my biggest cheerleaders is Barnett. Because I was able to prove to him myself my style of pro wrestling is legitimate. And when you know you have somebody that's that legit on your side, I mean what that's earning the respect of a fellow martial artist. I mean, he's somebody who I say is a martial artist first, he's a fighter second. And that is, and you don't get a lot of that with a lot of MMA guys. They're all real chumps or there's real boneheads or real meatheads. That's a martial artist first, that's a fighter second. And you know, that's somebody who I got to give a shout out to. And there's a lot of guys on the card and a lot of the people that are involved in the making of the event. Brett Lauderdale, the guy who's behind the scenes of GCW. We're talking about a guy who lost. We're talking like high five figures here. Lost his ass from the whole collective fallout in Tampa, and I'm not exaggerating. Who has worked in nonstop to try and get things going through all of this bullshit. We've been wrestling. If you're a part of GCW, the core roster, we've been wrestling for the last like 3 months, 4 months, basically, because of GCW. Okay? Not because of anybody else. Anybody else who's running shows is piggybacking off of GCW or other companies that started doing their own thing eventually. GCW never stopped. Okay? And that if it wasn't for Lauderdale, that wouldn't happen. Okay, so you know, everybody top to bottom, one of my best friends, Joey Janela, you know, these are guys that are involved in the company and they have the wrestler's best interest in mind first and foremost. I mean, that's why GCW has been able to become the powerhouse that it was before COVID, and it's still leading the charge of independent wrestling during the pandemic when, I mean, seemingly nothing was supposed to exist at all. And I don't see it changing at all after the pandemic. So shout out to GCW, my home, and everybody involved. And there's a lot of great wrestlers on the show. Don't overlook any of the talent on the event. If it's somebody maybe you haven't heard of before, give everybody a chance because this is an opportunity to really open up yourself to seeing something different. You know, it's the beauty of pro wrestling is variety, and we all have choices. And you know, you may see something that you've never seen before in an event like this because that's what an event like this it does. It presents an opportunity for wrestlers to think outside of the box, to tell a different type of story. That's why Bloodsport is so important. That's why it's so duplicated. I mean, you have independent wrestling companies that are completely ripping off of the concept And then you have the WWE that's dipping their toes in it, and fluffing it up with the production values and the cheesy camera angles and all that stuff. And listen, I'm not saying Bloodsport was the first martial art of baseball wrestling ever, but at least we have a guy at the helm and have people involved that know where it came from. We've been talking about it. Antonio Inoki, UWF, New Japan Pro Wrestling, the 80s, 86, Rio Goku. We could talk all day about this stuff. You know what I mean? But at least, we know where it came from, and we're trying to give you, the most legitimate presentation possible. And and the fact that it's an opportunity for guys and girls to work who haven't been able to do shit or make money. You don't understand. This is my life. This is my job. I haven't bitched and moaned a lot. I'm just not that type of guy. I don't go on Twitter and I do the me. Sometimes I get a little oh God, how much worse can it get? But this has been crippling. If I told you how much money I was making before this, and then I told you how much I'm making now, you'd laugh. But if I wasn't doing so good, I wouldn't have been able to make it through this because I just was smart about my funds. And thank God for Japan. Japan was, when I went to Japan in February, I did great. And the timing just all worked out for me personally. I can't say the same for a lot of other people. So you got to think there's a lot of talents on the card that haven't worked in a long time, and they're just hungry. They're hungrier probably even than me. They're looking for any opportunity to shine. So I think Bloodsport's going to be a great event. The spring break's going to be a great event. Please, just let reality go. Tune in, enjoy the shows, and just let us do what we do. You know what I mean? It's really it's all I could ask from the fans.
100%. And Steve Tatum says, looking forward to the women's match. It's the women's revolution times 10. Yes, there's females like, oh man, the Kaiju Power herself.
Killer Kelly.
Oh my God, I'm blanking on her name. God. Yes, there you go. Yeah, Lindsay Snow. It's amazing.
Diana Perazzo, my Italian cousin over there. But yeah, it'll be good.
It is. Hell yes, dude. It's going to be a phenomenal event, dude.
Did I lose you there, buddy?
I'm so glad, dude. But where can people find you on social media?
Did I lose you there for a second? What'd you say? I couldn't hear you.
Oh, where can people find you on social media?
Oh, I'm at Dirty Dickinson on Twitter, on Instagram, at Born Dirty Die Dirty. That's where you can find me. I ain't hard to find. Just type in Chris Dickinson. I'm usually the first thing that comes up, or type in Dirty Dickinson, Born Dirty Die Dirty. You'll know how to find me. Add me on there. Add me on the Instagram, baby. Add me on the Twitter. I feel like I use Instagram more. I love Instagram if you want to see more wrestling clips and stuff that I'm watching on a daily basis. Twitter kind of gets shitty. I stay off of Twitter sometimes. Too much regurgitated information, not just about wrestling, about everything. So sometimes I kind of just stay away. But I don't know.
Hell yeah,
that's where I'm at.
Steven Tatum says he's following you now, so you should follow him and the exploits. Chris, it's been such an honor to have you on. You're the fucking man.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I had fun talking to you.
No worries.
And if you wrestling, you all play along.
Hell yes. And if you guys haven't already done so, go ahead and subscribe to According to Woods, where we have awesome content and Bloodsport related content in the next couple of weeks. Some cool names, including this guy right